Welcome in, everyone. Good morning. It's Monday morning, a little after 7 a.m. HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I appreciate you joining me. It has been, we're getting into the second week of the John Calipari era at Arkansas. You know, he was introduced on a Wednesday about 10, 11 days ago, midweek. Went out to the West Coast, the left coast for the Wooden Awards. Things got quiet after they got really loud there for a while with Musselman leaving and John Calipari coming in a week span. And so since then, we've seen one player off the board to Arkansas with 13 scholarships to field, now down to 12. Big Z, we know about Zvonimir Ivicevic. And he's, again, a 7'2 forward, brings some versatility with that 7'2 frame, length, relative good foot quickness, good high, I'd say a high floor basketball IQ, floor IQ. Can shoot the three a little bit, do some things. We know Big Z's off the board. He's making the rounds in Fayetteville, man. Already doing some photo shoots at his new Razorback gear. Put some of that on his Instagram over the weekend. We know that he was at Bogle Park for the Razorbacks softball game over the weekend, taking bows in front of the fans. So we know Big Z's off the board. 12 more scholarships to fill. John Calipari has announced formally his first big hire, which will be the second in command. This is a role in a position that Kenny Payne, it's a big name in recruiting. It's a big name in Kentucky basketball. And it's a big name with John Calipari over the years. The biggest and best success Calipari had at Kentucky, Payne was riding shotgun there in Lexington. And so he was an assistant coach there for years, then an associate head coach. We know he went back to his alma mater at Louisville to be the head coach the last couple of years. That didn't work out, but announced as associate head coach just a few days ago. And so when we really look at the first week coming off that midweek formal announcement of the hire, we've seen just a little bit of activity in terms of results. I always talk about process and results, and the word patience, was used by Calipari in that introductory press conference, Wednesday before last. And so 12 days ago, he did talk about putting a staff together. He talked about getting players in. We know this is the best recruiter of all time. We talk about that all the time. I don't need to go through the resume to re-explain all of that. But patience was a word that was used by Calipari himself. And so I think when we start looking at this and going, well, we only see one player off the board, and here we are past mid-April now, and then at the end of May is typically Memorial Day weekend. It's typically when your new team carryovers from the previous team. We'll see if Arkansas has any of that. Again, no scholarship players until Big Z came on board, the transfer from Kentucky, a freshman this past season. But we'll see if any the holdovers come back. But your new team moves in for the next season, usually Memorial Day weekend. And so we're 5 weeks out from that, late May, early June. So we're about 5 weeks away from that, maybe a little more than that. So you're thinking, well, things can't happen fast enough. Calipari did talk about patience. But I think what's interesting is I think week 2 is going to be busy, and it starts today. So we're going to call it week 2 as far as his, the first week being last week of really being on the job, I guess. And he was busy. Calipari was busy making the rounds, and we're going to bleed into what happens today. But last week, what we know about is he stopped over in Atlanta midweek for the Overtime Elite Combine. That's important because two of his high school signee or recruits at Kentucky that were either committed or signed, Carter Knox, a 6'6" wing, just a star at Tampa Catholic High School before going to Overtime Elite. Last season, over 23 points per game, nearly 6 rebounds per game, nearly 3 assists per game. And look, shooting 34% from three. You look at his splits; they're fine. They're good. Not nothing elite about him, but good for a volume score. Again, 23 points per game, playing with elite talent on his team at Overtime Elite. But Carter Knox is one of the players. He didn't participate in the combine, but he was obviously there. Calipari got to visit with him. Somtu Cyril, a 6'10" center, 252 pounds. When you look at he only played 20 minutes per game at Overtime Elite. He did go through the combine, by the way, while Calipari was there a few days ago. And I think his standing vert was between 33 and 34 inches. He tested really well. When you talk 6'10", 250 plus, 33 plus standing vert, max vert was just under 40 inches, 39 plus. So good testing there. But these are two guys. He's a top 50 guy. Carter Knox, I mentioned, The composite national rankings have him number 22 in the country, a 5-star. The other 4 services on Carter Knox have him in the, ranging in ranking from 24 to 20. So somewhere in that buffer zone there, but a 4-star. But when you look at it from a composite perspective, he's a 5-star. So those were really the first, when we started hearing about Calipari, he was out on the road, by the way, with Chin Coleman, one of the assistants who has been with him at Kentucky, has not been announced formally yet. He's one of the names that I've reported on as being part of a package of coaches that are planning to come with him. And he's already been on the road recruiting with Calipari. So nothing formal announced there, but he was also there for that combine event. So what stands out, I went through some of the stats of Carter Knox. That was really the beginning of what we heard and found out publicly, because it was blasted all over video of Calipari being at that overtime elite event. He was up on the runner's track looking down on the court. You had college coaches all around the courts there, and he was kind of like the king of the hill there on top of everybody, looking down. And, as the best recruiter out there, it was kind of fitting that you see, that he had those optics. But that's being out on the road and doing the work. Patience meaning don't just expect names to fly off the board publicly. Well, there's due diligence, there's work that still needs to be done, and Calipari making the rounds. And Carter Knox, it pays off. Carter Knox will be on campus today, according to reporting by 247 Sports, will be on a visit. So we know Big Z's already in Fayetteville, just talked about that. Carter Knox is the name, when I'm asked recently, different platforms, who's the next name to come off the board, I say, well, by default, I think it's him, because he's the one I keep hearing the most about in terms of should be committing soon. So we'll see. You got a guy that committed to Kentucky in March, had never been, had not signed with the Wildcats, had only been committed since March, so just last month, and then decommitted when it was obvious that Calipari was making a move. Since that time, Calipari has seen him in person at least once that we know of. That was last week. I just mentioned at the Overtime Elite Combine, and now you've got Carter Knox coming in for a visit today to Fayetteville on campus. So, you're talking about a trifecta of moves that have happened really rather quickly. I mean, use the word patience. In real time, things are actually moving along. Calipari's been on the road. Other stops he's made, haven't gotten to those yet. But it's important to understand Carter Knox could be the second commitment. We've been thinking that he's going to be, but could it happen as soon as today? Or during his visit. I don't know how long the visit is. I don't know if it's one of those things where, he shows up today and there's a commitment announced today. Obviously, he could come to campus and things don't work out, and he's still available. Are we really in the running for Adou? I'm going to talk about that. But Carter Knox, let's go through it. 6'6", I'm having listed 6'5", 6'6", explosive rim hunter, slasher. You talk about an alpha. I mean, the guy I mentioned, overtime elite, 23 points per game, but he's gonna drive and attack the rim. He's got a nice mid-post game, so he's a crafty scorer. Talked to an NBA scout, I think it was yesterday. The days are starting to run together. I think it was just yesterday. Talked to an NBA scout about him, and he said he projects well as an offensive player, and like most young players, has a long way to go defensively. We know Calipari's team last year, with all that young talent and some of it really skilled offensively, not as good a defensive team, but Carter Knox is one of those guys that you eyeball as a future NBA player and a potential lottery pick at some point. Obviously, a potential first rounder looking ahead. McDonald's All-American. In McDonald's game, I think he played 12 minutes, but was 4 of 6 shooting from the field. It's an all-star game at 9 points, efficient performance. And when you look at the per minute production of the McDonald's game, it's hard to take away a lot of that. But I went through his production plan for Overtime Elite this past season. Just a phenomenal athlete. A guy that can go out there and get you 30. We'll see how that translates as a college freshman. But again, a top 25 player, McDonald's All-American, 5-star in the composite rankings, on campus today. Going to be on campus and taking a visit. So I think we keep an eye. We're on alert right now. We're at DEFCON, I guess, 5 in terms of the next commitment potentially, because when you get them on campus. And look, here's a guy on his IG account that put Chicken Man on there. So I'm spending a lot of time, which is a reference very likely to John Tyson, who helped bring Calipari to Arkansas. And we know the NIL money is supposed to be stepped up here. I have a source that told me that heard a figure thrown out there that was offered to Carter Knox and that the parties might have gone back to the drawing board after that initial number. I've got one source on that. I don't have a second or a true confirmation on that. Just something I heard about that. These things take time. Part of that visit process today, likely NIL is going to come up at some point on his trip to Northwest Arkansas. So we just see how that plays out. So we've got a lot more stuff to cover, but I think the first name we really want to talk about right now is Carter Knox, because he's, the plans are that he'll be on campus today. Things can change, obviously, at any time in recruiting, but that's according to reporting by 247 Sports. And I believe it. I think that things have really heated up with him once Calipari was moving to Arkansas. And so did it take a little more time than we maybe thought some names would start rolling off? I mean, relative to in real time, it's not that long. Calipari's doing the work. Getting him on campus is part of that process. Got some questions rolling in. I'm going to get to some of those. So I think that's just one name, but there's a lot of stuff that's been going on. I mentioned Calipari last week. Not only was he in Atlanta, but he was in Florida. He stopped at Montverde Academy to see recently decommitted from Indiana 5-star McDonald's All-American Liam McNeely, 6'7" wing, knockdown shooter from 3. This guy's one of those, give it to you any way you want it. Catch and shoot, spot up, little dribble craft to get into him, step back, side steps. But he ranges between 40 and 50% when you look at everything. Playing at the highest levels in grassroots basketball in the spring and summer. Playing at Montverde Academy, a dynasty, and plays the best teams and best competition in the country year in and year out. So this guy can do more than shoot, but that's what he's known for. I got to watch him again last night in the Jordan Brand Classic. Got to watch that with some other names I'm going to bring up here in a little bit. But McNeely was just doing what he does, man, knocking down those shots. And because he's 6'7", he's got good enough handles to put the ball on the deck, drive, and he's got that big frame. So if you try to cut him off or stop him, he's got enough skill to either finish or draw a contact, and he's going to step at the free throw line and shoot that at a high clip as well. So I like Liam McNeely, but Calipari was at Montverde to specifically see him. Now, he's on a visit since the Jordan Brand Classic. He's supposed to start a visit today to two-time defending national champ UConn. It may be hard to beat the Huskies. Are getting him on campus first, but Arkansas is making a play. John Calipari there. There is an unconfirmed rumor, I'm going to call it a rumor, that I've gotten that while in Florida, Calipari may have met with and visited with John L. Davis, the 6'4" guard, just a dynamic player out of Florida Atlantic. I don't know if you've seen John L. play, John L. Davis, but 4 years and one of those homegrown talents for Dusty May at Florida Atlantic. We know the Owls made it to the Final Four 2 NCAA tournaments ago out of the mid-major ranks. This past season, ranked most of the season, lost to Northwestern in the NCAA tournament. But John L. Davis, if true, if he's met with him, and the rumor is it may be down to Arkansas and Kentucky of all places for his services. We'll see if that's true. I don't have this confirmed. I haven't seen it publicly put out. I'm going to call it a rumor for now. But John L. Davis, have you seen this guy? 18.2 points per game, 6.3 rebounds as a 6'4" guard, 2.9 assists, 1.4 steals. I mean, he gives you a little bit of everything all over the court. If you watch him, stats sometimes can be deceiving. In his case, they're not at all. They're not at all. Okay, so the sun's peeking through the tree leaf foliage out here. We may be getting some bad lighting or weird lighting this morning. Let's see if I need this now. I may not even need the ring light as much. But John L. Davis, man, he's one of those players that there's not a playing style that doesn't work for him. He's gotten better every year. If you look at his work in the NCAA tournament, going back to the Final Four, I think that was his junior season. He averaged between 13 and 14 points per game on the season, averaged between 15 and 16 points per game in that NCAA tournament. So a lot of times you see players shrink in postseason or when the matchups get tougher. He's a guy that's gotten progressively better in those scenarios. All right, we're getting a really tough glare here. Did not count on that because that's not happened to me on these 7 a.m. tour de forces here. I don't know if changing an angle will help, but we are going to change the angle. See if that helps a little bit. It's still a pretty mean glare coming in. It's, man, not what I was counting on today. That may have made things a little bit worse. I'm not sure. But here we are rambling along. I hope you put up with one side of my face. I almost look angelic the way the lights hit me there. I've taken the liberty here to take some notes on some things. But John L. Davis, again, that's a rumor. I'm not sure how valid that information is. But if it is, that's significant. So it's under the radar for sure if it's true. But just going through some other stuff that I've learned. And this is a young man who put himself in the portal just last week out of Kentucky. I think he's the last name to come off the board for Kentucky to go into the portal. You've got players going to go into the NBA draft. You've had players in the portal. We know Big Z was Arkansas's first commitment out of the Kentucky portal. But another name, there are several names to keep an eye on, but the latest one is Jordan Burks, 6'8"ish, small forward wing, can play that combo forward spot in small ball lineups. Not only into the portal, very limited action last year, only played in 20 games. In those 20 games, averaged 7 minutes a game, so just under 2 points and 2 rebounds per game. Was efficient, 60% shooter from the field in limited opportunities. Made 2 of 5 from 3, so 40%. Not a whole lot to take out of a very small sample size like that. Really difficult to glean much out of that. But what I will say about a guy like him is when you look at 6'8", Calipari recruited him to Kentucky for a reason in the portal. And I have a source that told me that over the weekend, Calipari had dinner with Burks and his family. This is part of his on the road project. Now, I don't know if that was in Fayetteville, if he was in Fayetteville, or if that was off, in Lexington or where it might have been. I did not get that part confirmed. What I have been told is Calipari had dinner with he and his family. Typically, that means there's some talks going on about bringing a player on board because he just went into the transfer portal not that long ago. So that's significant. So keep an eye on that. I think Burks could be a guy similar to Big Z coming from Kentucky in the portal that could join the forces here with Calipari at Arkansas. And why is that important? If you look at their stats, both guys, they're not going to overwhelm you. You have to go and watch the tape. You have to, Big Z's got more of a body of work even in 15 games than Burks was able to establish in 20 games. But here are a few things you like. Calipari is going to be recruiting his McDonald's All-Americans that he brought to Kentucky. We're going to go that had signed or committed. We're going to go through more of those names. We talked about Carter Knox, a little bit about Cyril, but there's going to be other pathways to getting big, high-profile names. But if you look at Burks, what I see here along with Big Z is just continuity of bringing in players that have familiarity with your system, the expectations on and off the court, and those are the kind of guys that help you transition freshmen who are coming in, even veteran guys. When you're pulling veteran guys out of the portal from other places, there are guys in camp who know what's expected. They know what John Calipari is talking about. They understand the language. They're going to help with these transitions. And so I think there's some importance. So I think Burks, I'm talking about him as though he's going to be a guy out of the portal to Arkansas. I believe that will likely happen. How soon? Is this a guy they're going to bring in for a visit and come to campus and one of those things? Probably, I would think so. But we'll see what happens there. But I think Burks is a guy that's very much in play, especially since I've learned that Calipari has had dinner recently done over the weekend with his family. So that tells me there's progress being made in potentially bringing him to Fayetteville. So that would be another player on your roster. DJ Wagner, let's just stay in Kentucky's portal right now. DJ Wagner, who was at one point the number 1 player in the class of 2023. He consistently held that ranking. It kind of fluctuated. But as a freshman in a really talent-rich backcourt last year at Kentucky, when you looked at it, he was dealing a little bit with injury, but 9.9 points, so right at 10 points per game, nearly 3.5 assists, and his assist-to-turnover ratio, I talk about this, was better than 2-to-1, a little better than 2-to-1. So there's some things that are definitely workable and transferable in terms of a combo guard that can set the table for others and then also score. Shooting percentage is not quite where you want him to be, especially from 3, just under 30%. 6'3" combo guard. So but you see a lot of times players making that jump in their progress and their development and what they bring to the table in their production. You see those things shift and get better from freshman to sophomore season. Not always, but a lot of times you do. And again, Calipari, there's a history there with Dewan Wagner Jr. His dad played for Calipari at Memphis. Kenny Payne is thought to be a key piece, and maybe retention. When I talk about retention now, you're not retaining him. It wouldn't be Kentucky retaining these players. It'd be Calipari having some level of retention. Man, I got blown up by the sun today. I don't know how we're gonna make this work without making it worse. I'm stepping back into it here. Thank you for bearing with me. I always seem to have some kind of technical snafu, as this is not my forte in terms of making it all polished. Just trying to get the information to you. But just staying in the portal, and we're going to wrap that up at Kentucky. Adou Thiero's another name we've heard, another 6'8" small forward wing that can transition a little bit to a small ball combo 4. But a guy that's in the portal, and he's played 2 seasons for Calipari at Kentucky. Arkansas supposedly is in a Final 5 for him. He's also testing NBA or pro options. So we keep an eye on these portal names because you've already got Big Z, so there's 3 more. And we just went through them. A couple of wing 3-4 combos if you want to stretch it on small ball talk. And then DJ Wagner, a combo guard. So there's some versatility. There's length on those wings. We know Big Z 7'2". So we'll see about Burks, Thiero, and DJ Wagner moving forward. All right, let's jump back in now because we're talking going back to the committed class, or was committed for Calipari at Kentucky. We talked about Carter Knox. Jaden Quaintance, 6'9" forward, 16 years old. He's going to have to spend 2 years somewhere before he can be eligible for the NBA draft in 2026. So that means likely whatever college he picks, he's going to be there for 2 years. Because of the era of the transfer portal, I wouldn't even stick to that necessarily. I guess he could play 1 year at one school, go to the portal and play a second year somewhere else, and then go on the draft. But the idea is there's a lot of schools clamoring for him, thinking they're going to have him locked maybe for 2 years. And so Quaintance is very talented. I got to see him play again last night. I mentioned the Jordan Brand Classic, a couple of nice dunks. He can be very active. He's still raw in some ways, but he's got a nice face-up touch. I've seen him step out and shoot from 3 competently. 15 feet, he looks comfortable shooting to me, but he's a guy in a lot of these scenarios where you see him rim running and playing around the basket. And again, he continues to get stronger. He's got a great physique. For a 16-year-old who's 6'9", I mean, he's built. He's got good length. You love his athleticism. And I've seen him bulldog some guys around the basket and have his way. And so he's still maturing. Like I said, he's a little bit younger than everybody else for his classification. But he's a guy that not only requested a release from his signed national letter of intent with Kentucky, but there is reporting that's out, according to another national analyst, that Quaintance is likely down to 3 schools. And those 3 would be Louisville, where he just recently visited, Arkansas, where Adam Zagoria, now a freelance writer, has done a lot of work covering college basketball and professional tennis, of all things, for Forbes magazine and the New York Times. But he was covering the event last night, the Jordan Brand Classic in Brooklyn, and Quaintance, he interviewed him, and he's basically talked about he liked his visit to Louisville. He plans to visit Arkansas. He talked about that's something he's going to do. Also Memphis. So keep an eye on those 3 for now. I guess anything else could rise up. But Louisville, Arkansas, and Memphis. And so I go back to this. I think getting Carter Knox on campus today is a big deal. I think that may lock things up for Arkansas. I feel like if Arkansas gets Quaintance on campus, it's advantage Arkansas, because John Calipari signed this player had already got him to sign a letter of intent, not just commit. Remember that part. And so Kentucky, apparently, based on the reporting that's out there, Kentucky's not in the mix. So I don't know if that could change. I don't know if that's something that could deviate. But right now it looks like Louisville, Arkansas, and Memphis. And he didn't commit to Louisville after visiting there. Anything can change. We can learn today. He said, I'm done. He shuts it down and decides to commit to Louisville or do something else or add some other team. But he's told Zagoria, and just hours ago in Brooklyn, following the Jordan Brand Classic, I take it, that he's looking to visit Arkansas. So keep an eye. This is a McDonald's All-American national. When you look at the composite national rankings, Quaintance top 10, the highest rated of the 5 stars that Calipari had on board in that 2024 high school class. Played at Word of God Christian Academy there in Raleigh, North Carolina. Um, and so that's one of those schools that's kind of been a basketball factory over the years, put out some really good players. This is a young man, when I really look at his upside, looks to me potentially as another NBA lottery pick. That's easy to say when we're talking about a top 10 rated 5-star in his class. And he also is younger. He's rated that highly, being 16 years old. So who doesn't want to land him? And I think Arkansas could be in great shape if they actually do get him on campus. I think there may have been a little concern because he was visiting Louisville, that you always have to when they're taking visits elsewhere. But I think still talking about coming to Arkansas tells me that he's really got his ears and mind open and listening to what Calipari's selling here for him if he were to be a Razorback. So let's keep an eye on that. Boogie Fland, another big-time player, another McDonald's All-American. Quaintance was a McDonald's All-American. We know Carter Knox was. Boogie Fland, the third McDonald's All-American in that 6-player high school class that Kentucky had. 5 of them decommitted, by the way. So none committed elsewhere yet. So Arkansas is hoping to haul these guys in. But Boogie Fland, 6'2" combo guard, very skilled guy. That makes nice plays as a passer, can get a shot from just about anywhere he wants, anytime he wants. One of those guys, and he's a sneaky good defender. I keep noticing how he uses his quickness, and he gets into players on their blind side when they turn, when he helps down or digs in for the basketball. So he helps generate a lot of turnovers, a lot of 50-50 balls, and now you're racing the other way, and he is, he's one of those players that's really electric in the open court because he can either beat you with a crafty move and finish or with a setup pass for somebody. But I really like Boogie Fland. Zagoria, who I just mentioned, the reporter talked to him, and he mentioned that Calipari is trying to persuade him to come visit Arkansas. And so he's not sure in that conversation, in that interview, he wasn't sure yet what he's going to do. A lot of schools will be after him as well. So, those were the McDonald's All-Americans in that class. I mentioned to Cyril at Overtime Elite. After that combine, a few days after that, maybe through the weekend, Cyril was off to Georgia. That was one of the schools mentioned that he would be interested in. A handful of schools. Georgia was one of them, and he had a visit there. So we'll see if Cyril, how serious he is. I mentioned man-child size, 6'10", over 250. And he's got a nice vert based on that testing at the combine for a man with that frame. And one thing I noticed watching film of Cyril is not only the strength, but he's one of those low block, post a guy, spread that big frame out, pin guys, seal guys off, and then he's got a good release off of that. When a ball's being entered, a lot of times big guys like that can't create more space on a release, and he just nudges guys even more out of the way for the catch, and then there's not a lot of defenders wanting to get in his way when he's going up to dunk the ball, and he gets up pretty well because I mentioned those vert stats. There's other things he can do, but again, 20 minutes per game at OTE. When you stretch out his per 40, not only was he making 2 out of every 3 shots, 67%, but his per 40 numbers, over 18 points, over 18 rebounds, and 6.5 blocks at Overtime Elite. So he didn't average that, but that's per 40. He played about 20 minutes a game, so you can cut those about in half, 20, 21 minutes per game. So that's Cyril. Billy Richmond, who also played. Now, he's a top 40 guy according to ESPN, 4-star. When you look at the composite rankings, he came in at number 25. And he's rated as a 5-star in the composite. Sometimes that confuses me. The composite's really an aggregate of several of the major national recruiting services. They put it all together and spit out a composite ranking at a star value. So if you want to look at the composite rankings, he's another 5-star, the 4th one in that class. But Billy Richmond, 6'6" wing, family ties again with Calipari because of his dad, Memphis area. Richmond played at Camden High School in New Jersey this past season. Again, 6'6", explosive guy, played in the Jordan Brand Classic last night. One of those guys that I think could project as a plus or even elite defender down the road. Can shoot it a little bit, but really, he's also a slasher, get to the rim guy. Love him in transition. Love the length and size at 6'6". And when you look at Calipari players that he recruits, he goes after he's a star chaser, but you see a lot of guys relative to their positions typically with a lot of length and athleticism, and he just puts all that together and makes, he's had a lot of really good rebounding teams, and over the years, and teams that do well in transition. And when you watch some of these guys in some of these events, you understand part of the method to his madness in recruiting. All right, 30 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Billy Richmond's a guy that I think Arkansas will also be in play for. Again, he was a committed player to Kentucky and just decommitted. So no letter of intent to get out of. Jaden Quaintance requested his release. We haven't heard reporting yet as to whether or not that was granted. It should be. Boogie Fland, also a player that requested a release. Thiero was a guy who reported that his release was granted. So there's always these little varying stages of where things stand. And then, of course, Knox and Richmond decommitted. One other player in that 6-player class, top 75 according to ESPN, a Kentucky native, Travis Perry, 6'1" guard, Mr. Kentucky basketball. He big time high school player there in that state. My guess is he sticks to Mark Pope and the Wildcats. We'll see, but I've never thought that that'd be a guy that would be in play moving on and joining Calipari at Arkansas. But I guess you never know. So we've moved through the high school players that were once upon a time committed to Kentucky. Where things kind of stand with some of those guys. Has Arkansas contacted Tucker Anderson, Central Arkansas player? Keep an eye on Ohio State right there. I guess things could change. Arkansas staff was made aware of Tucker Anderson. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to say anything more about contacts. But early on, the folks who mattered once Calipari came on board were notified about Tucker Anderson, 6'8" forward from Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville West. Played his freshman season at UCA, the Atlantic Sun, freshman of the year, led UCA in scoring this year. Really good 3-point shooter, does some other things, but 6'8", 6'9" wing. Some people think this guy may end up being a pro someday. We'll see. Got to get stronger, but he definitely has a lot of the tools. Especially you can't, at 6'8", 6'9", with some of his shooting skill and the way in his high floor IQ, some of the things he brings to the table as a player outside of the shooting, help you understand why high majors are all over this kid after coming out after his freshman season for playing at UCA. So we'll see about Tucker Anderson. But we've moved through the players that have either decommitted or got out of their releases from Kentucky. Calipari's really working hard. Maybe Carter Knox, one of those 3 McDonald's All-Americans, 5-star. Maybe he's the first name off the board. Maybe during his visit today at Arkansas. We've gone through the portal players for Kentucky. I think Arkansas is in great shape. Outside of Big Z, there's 3 more names. I think Arkansas is in great shape with at least 2, maybe all 3 of those guys. We're going to jump real quick into Arkansas's portal players just to give an update there. Caliph Battle, not a lot of info on him. The same with Layden Blocker. Behind the scenes, yes, I have some info on him, not at liberty to share. But these are guys, when you look at it, there's not been any kind of national talk really about visits or any teams really closing in there. Devo Davis has taken some visits. Most recently, Oklahoma State. Before that, it was Grand Canyon and Florida Atlantic. I think at least 2 of those guys, maybe all 3, are open to being recruited by Calipari. But those things have to be mutual. There is a process here. Calipari has spent a lot of time on the road, by the way, since taking over at Arkansas. I just went through some of that in some of these places he's been last week. And then the half week after he was announced formally on a Wednesday, he was out in Los Angeles for the Wooden Awards. And so, a lot of time spent on the road recruiting. That's what you want your staff to do. Again, there are guys working with him that haven't been formally announced. We've seen video proof of that. We know Kenny Payne's on board. That's going to help. Big time play. He's got a reputation, Kenny Payne does, as coaching up big men, being a big man whisperer, if you will. And you go back to the guys like Anthony Davis and some of those guys in the early days at Kentucky back in the 2010s, when they really went, 4 Final Fours for Calipari while he was there, 6 overall, the national title. But Kenny Payne was riding shotgun for those and a big part of that success. So he's going to help on and off the court when you look at his role at Arkansas. And look, I was told it was going to take upward of $1 million to get him. That's probably about right. When you add everything up, he's probably in for around $1 million. I guess we'll see at some point. Someone will do a FOIA request and get the numbers on his contract. If I haven't seen them out there, but they might be out there already. But I was told it was going to take upward of $1 million to get him per year, so that's probably about right. And I think when you added up Arkansas staff last year, I mean, I remember, I think the highest paid on the staff was Keith Smart, and that was over, I think, 400,000, maybe around there, 400, maybe he had it up closer to 500 by the time he left, but somewhere in that range. And the rest of the staff added up to just under a million. So you, you know, that's what that's the kind of name that Kenny Payne has, but not just a name built on success as the right hand man, and that's a lot of that again was with Calipari. But going into more players now, I just went through the Arkansas's portal situation. Of course, Bay Falls in the portal. I don't think there's again with him. There's stuff going on behind the scenes. Nothing that's come out yet. And so I've talked to a couple of parents of players recently, and a third player's I'll call him a handler, mentor, with these Arkansas players that are still in the portal, and we haven't seen a lot of news or traction on. And I think there's a willingness to listen. It's all going to be where is the mutual interest levels, and how far along have decisions really been made in those situations. And so there may be some stuff going on there that we just don't know about, and some of these folks are sitting on and holding on to, or maybe it truly is a situation where they're still trying to sort through that and figure it out. So though, that's so now we've looked at Arkansas's portal, Kentucky's portal, the high school players in the play. How about just the portal in general? Because Arkansas fans got so used to Eric Musselman with just the contact and if you could fog a mirror and had just barely a pulse, and you got in the portal, Arkansas is going to reach out to you, going to contact a lot of guys. Arkansas's name's mentioned with it seemed like every player. It wasn't. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but a lot of them, high percentage of them, and already, if you look out west, Musselman's every day it seems like USC's nabbing a commitment out of the portal. Do not confuse that and Arkansas's lack of public information and public commitments being out there. Is Arkansas getting behind by any shape or form? Calipari said, "Be patient." He has a different working process, and he has just made a change from Kentucky to Arkansas, and so certain stars have to align for the 5 stars and some of these other names. But just jumping into the portal, I mentioned John L. Davis out of Florida Atlantic. I told you guys, as far as I know, that's a rumor. I've not been able to confirm that, but if it's true, in Arkansas and Kentucky, it's the last 2. That's a guy you want to get. That is to me a day one starter player. His minutes, his production, his efficiency got better every year. Dusty May did a great job with him at Florida Atlantic. We understand Dusty May's moved on to Michigan, but he's a player that if true, if it is down to Arkansas and Kentucky, I mean, I don't know how Michigan's not in play there, or if this is just not good information. But if it's true, there's a big portal name. Brandon Garrison. I'm going to get to a dude. Brandon Garrison, recent visits to Oklahoma and Texas. Have not seen anything before coming on here that he's committed to either one of those schools. And supposedly Arkansas and Kentucky are in line for visits. Can Arkansas get Brandon Garrison, a 2023 McDonald's All-American? Freshman season at Oklahoma State. Just got in the portal recently, or he's been in the portal, but just got on these visits recently. And now you wondered, will Arkansas get a visit? But 6'10", 6'11", a young man I got to cover in person and see a lot in high school. And last year at Oklahoma State, was a regular in the lineup, starter, 7.5 points, 5.3 rebounds, 1.5 blocks per game, 1.5 assists, shot at over 57%. Not a great free throw shooter, 63%, but one of those back to the basket kind of guys, very active, can be very active around the rim with putbacks, low post work. He's got a nice little, catch, you throw it, pitch it into him down low, and he turns into the paint going left or right. Decent drop step, so decent footwork. And a guy that can step out facing up 14, 15 feet and in. So if you play, a lot of elbow screens, or if he rolls shallow off 2-man game into that shallow area in the free throw line extending the horns area, he can knock down that little face up shot. So 15 feet and in is really his game. But again, 6'10", 6'11", McDonald's All-American in 2023. Was part of those Team USA summer events where those teams had success. So he's played against really good competition before he got into college, and then certainly 1 year at Oklahoma State. So we'll see if Arkansas is in play there. Everybody wants to know about Jonas Aidoo. He's a guy that for over a week now we've heard Arkansas is maybe among a handful of teams that'll be in the mix for him. Took a weekend visit to Baylor. I've heard nothing post visit. Was supposed to visit Baylor. I'm not even sure that happened, but he was supposed to visit Baylor. Baylor just got a commitment from Jeremy Roach, who decommitted from Duke, big time player there. Word was maybe they're going to land Adou also. 6'11" forward from Tennessee, junior transfer, has one more year to go. But really, 23-12 on Arkansas in that 29-point win for the Vols in Bud Walton Arena last year. We know it was the best team in the SEC a season ago. Made it to an Elite Eight. Tennessee did. But you look at Jonas Aidoo, very active guy. Played about only 27 minutes a game inside, playing in that paint, patrolling the paint. But just brings so many elements to the floor. I mean, between 11 and 12 points per game, over 7 rebounds, nearly 2 blocks per game at around 27 minutes. It's really good production, shooting 51.5% from the field, and another guy in the low 60s at the free throw line. So you hope he gets better there. But he's a guy that supposedly Arkansas's in the mix with the Final Four. I mentioned Baylor, North Carolina, and there was another team in that mix. See if I wrote it down. I've already forgotten it. I think it was Baylor, Arkansas, North Carolina. If somebody knows the answer to that, I guess it's kind of important. It may be Kentucky. I'm not even sure who it was. But I know Baylor and North Carolina were 2 of the 4 that Arkansas's in the mix, grouped up there. So we'll see about a visit. We'll see if Adou. Some folks I talked to believe that Arkansas is going to get him. A lot of momentum that Baylor might get him. And then, where does North Carolina fit into the mix here? And then there is another school. So if Arkansas is truly in the Final Four for Adou, then that means Calipari's still in the running. Anything can happen. That would be a big time portal get. So I mentioned the continuity of bringing guys out of Kentucky's portal. There would be some level of continuity at Arkansas for any of those Arkansas players that are still in the portal and there's not been movement on. But you've got a whole new regime and staff. So the only continuity there is just acclimating teammates to the campus, I guess, and to here's how you maximize the performance center. Here's what to know about Bud Walton Arena. Those kind of things. And again, I don't know what level of interest there really is for Calipari and the Arkansas players that maybe potentially could be in play. Certainly, he's familiar with his Kentucky guys, and I think more than Big Z are coming over from that Kentucky portal. I think several of these high school guys, I've said before, I think he'll get at least half, likely more than half of the high school class that he got. The longer things go, what you're really paying attention to now is Arkansas being on these narrow lists and then getting them on campus. So I still think they'll end up with at least half of them. We'll see if that ends up being true. I may have to back down from that. Ronnie Brewer, people are still asking about staff. I mentioned, obviously, Kenny Payne. Chin Coleman was one of the assistants that's been on the road with Calipari. Chuck Martin is another one. Orlando Antigua. When Kenny Payne moved on, Antigua was one of those guys that came on board with Kentucky. He was kind of that guy riding shotgun. And he was a guy that we were told initially, this is when I reported the day before on a Tuesday, the day before Calipari was formally announced, that as many as 6 staffers would be brought with him. And the reason I worded it that way is because I was told there may be some folks that peel off for one reason or another because Kenny Payne was a target. And so it makes sense to me. Orlando Antigua going back to work with Brad Underwood at Illinois. That's a guy that he was with before moving over. I think he's not only a veteran guy, but a well-respected recruiter. But Orlando Antigua off to Illinois, not going to make the transition. Chin Coleman, Chuck Martin, I believe, still in play. Bruiser Flint, Brad Calipari in a player development role. I still think that'll likely be the role he has. So now we get down to some Arkansas names. Ronnie Brewer Jr., last I heard, technically still in flux. We'll see. I mean, he's recruiting. He's making phone calls. He's staying in touch with recruits. To me, when I go back to Scotty Thurman, he was a guy that transitioned from one staff to the other. When he went Mike Anderson to Eric Musselman, he helped Musselman out, helped hold the fort down, did some things there, but was not retained as an assistant coach, which was his job under Mike Anderson. He was offered a different position and opted not to do that. I'm not sure if Ronnie Brewer is not in a very similar situation right now. I don't know the answer to that. You can have up to 5 assistants now. Back then it was only 3, but only 3 of your 5 can still travel and recruit. And so we'll have to see what kind of role Ronnie Brewer Jr. maybe is being offered. I think retaining him would be a great idea. A pro hog, lottery pick hog, great hog when he was a player, and has been, solid. I mean, solid as a recruiting coordinator and assistant coach at Arkansas. So we'll see if that's in Calipari's plans or not. Joe Johnson's another name I've reported that's in conversations. I've reported he's in play. Now here's a guy that doesn't have a background in coaching, only as a player, one of the best to do it. But he was an Arkansas Razorback over 2 decades ago. Now in his early 40s, and so you wonder how serious those conversations are. I think they're serious, and I think we could see a potential for a role for Joe Johnson. The longer we wait on hearing more about the staff, it tends to lead me to they don't want to slow leak anything else. Kenny Payne, it was important to announce him first, associate head coach, and maybe the next thing we get is just a group announcement. We'll see if it comes out that way, but maybe Joe Johnson's in there, maybe he's not. I don't rule that out because I had more than one source tell me that is a real conversation that's being had, and it's beyond just friendly talk. It's like, how can we make this work? So, that would be a big change for Joe, not for Calipari. He's a guy that knows what he wants in terms of players and coaches. Does Joe Johnson, if Calipari really wants him, is that enough to move Joe? And does he want to take on that? Because here's a guy that doesn't need money. he can pick any career he wants or any pastime or hobby he wants. And does he have a passion to transition from player to mentor, coach, whatever the role might be? So we'll see. So I think that's a real thing. Does it happen? I don't know. We're talking the difference between process and results, but a lot of things going on. We're talking about, things are starting to move. This could be a very busy week. Carter Knox on campus. Who else can they get to visit? Calipari on the road, seeing recruits, going and seeing them in person, having dinner with players and their families. That tells me that the needle's moving. Are we going to hear a splash of commitments this week? Remember, I told you the timeline. We're 47 minutes in. I told you the timeline when we start talking about players and your team moving on campus. 5 or 6 weeks out. Yeah, John L. Davis, man. Johnell. I know I'm saying John. It sounds like I'm saying John initial L Davis. Someone put that on there. It's John L. Johnell is how I've seen it spelled. Davis. Pretty easy. Does Arkansas swap Davises? Devo Davis visited Florida Atlantic. That was one of the schools he visited recently. Florida Atlantic, John L. Davis, is Calipari really on him? There's rumors out there that maybe he is. I'm going to keep using that word for now, but that would be an incredible get out of the portal. Just incredible. And I talked about Brandon Garrison, talked about Jonas Aidoo out of Tennessee, a couple of, another wing, a shooter, Kobe Brea, 6'6" wing at a Dayton, a really good mid-major program, NCAA tournament program, just over 11 points per game this year. He's a spot-up shooter, deep range three-point shooter, very efficient. 100 out of 201 attempts, nearly 50%, 49.8% from three, averaged 11 points per game and making 3 threes per game on average. So most of his scoring, as you can see, comes from behind the three-point line, very efficient. And when I go and watch him, not only at 6'6", good size on that wing, but a very efficient, economized player when in terms of what he does with the ball when he has it. He doesn't have to be on the ball. He's not a ball hog, not a ball pounder. Catch and shoot, spot up shooting, very minimized, economized dribbling to get into a shot with his craft. And that reminds me of Isaiah Joe. Had that crazy NBA range, didn't need to pound the ball to get to his, could play off the creativity of others. And then his own creativity didn't take much time. So the ball moves. They make good decisions with the ball if they're not going to shoot it. And so that's when I seen a guy like that. And I like players like that because not everybody can be a slasher. Not everybody can be a ball demander. You got to have guys to complement guys, and then they can still be productive for you. And so he's a player like that. We'll see. Arkansas has been in contact with him. We'll see where that goes. B.J. Freeman, big time scorer out of Milwaukee, is another name that Calipari and Kentucky staff was recruiting out of the portal initially. I don't know where that is right now either, but another big wing that can score. I mentioned John L. Davis. So there's some names out there when you're talking back court wings, front court. Casey and Pryor, 6'9" forward, over 13 points per game. Good stats out of South Florida that's in the portal. Arkansas has reached out to him. Sean Stewart, 6'9" forward out of Duke. Big time player coming out of high school, freshman season last year. One of the players for Duke that's in the portal that Arkansas has reached out to with this new staff. Kobe Bryant needs to be a Hog. I really like him. He's going to Kentucky. That's one of the thoughts that's out there, that he's maybe or likely Kentucky bound. I think Kentucky, based on the rumor, feels good about John L. Davis as well. I mean, we'll see about some of these guys, but one of the things I like about Bria and Isaiah Joe is when I look at players like that don't need a lot to get theirs and they really help you win and they make winning plays, man, to me, we focus so much on the big stats and guys that when we watch them, they're ball dominant and you see their highlights, but a lot of times there's also some downside to that. With guys like Brett and Isaiah Joe, they're low maintenance. They don't need a lot. They don't demand the ball a lot. They just go and play, and they can beat you in multitude of ways and then they complement everybody else. I love shooters and I love players that bring those elements to the table. All right, 52 minutes in. By the way, going back to John L. Davis, his shooting splits for a guy averaging 18 points a game, over 48% from the field, between 41 and 42% from three, and over 85% at the free throw line. And you go back and look at him statistically. I mentioned he averaged scoring better in NCAA tournament play in that Final Four run than he averaged during the regular season. Was an early exit for Florida Atlantic this year, but he hit his average 18 points in that loss to Northwestern. But a big 30-plus point, 35, 36 points, 9 rebounds against fourth-ranked Arizona back in December, a game that went to overtime. I think it was 96-92. I remember watching that game. It just went off. And this guy is a stud, man. John L. Davis, I'm spending time on a guy that I'm talking about in terms of rumors right now. I'd like to know more about that situation. Making sure I didn't leave anybody off here. I think we've gone through just about everybody. But I think it's going to be a busy week, not only in terms of Carter Knox being on campus. Who else can they get on campus? Now that we've seen in the last few days Billy Richmond decommit, and we've seen Jordan Burks going to the portal, and Calipari's already been dining over the weekend. I mean, just hours basically after he's gone in the portal. I think that says a lot. I think we're going to start to see some momentum. How many commitments does that equate to this week? I think he's on the precipice of landing at least one potentially today in Carter Knox. And anybody that's got a gripe with me doing these at 7 a.m., it's because I'm so knee-jerk to the Musselman era where this time of year when the portal's hopping, even though it's slowing down for some programs because of the late coaching change, it's constant information coming out during normal business hours. Hasn't quite been like that for Calipari, but it could ramp up this week because of all the news drops that came out just last night. When you start to see a flood of news drops with one team and one coach in particular on a Sunday night, that tells you people are getting out ahead of things with information, and we might start to really see things pick up with visits, even commitments, and things like that. And of course, there's still going to be probably some new names we hear in the portal that Arkansas then Calipari and his staff are reaching out to. I'm really curious to see, is this the week where we hear about staff announcements formally? I'm interested to see, again, starts with Carter Knox potentially today. What other players can they get on campus this week through the weekend? Where's Calipari traveling to see guys? He's making the rounds. He's sitting down with families. He's going to see players. He's got at least Kenny Payne and Chin Coleman because I've seen them in action already. So I think someone's complaining about the delivery method today. Well, at least the bright light, the sun's moved on from where it was hitting me. We may have to change the time to 6 a.m. next time just to avoid the sun. That was really weird. We got through it almost an hour in. I am going to cut it off at an hour here. I want to thank you again for joining me at HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Really trying to get a jump on the week because I think it's going to be a busy week for Calipari. Does that translate into things that have weight, things that have bulk? If you like to think of it as turning into a werewolf, are there going to be fangs and hair this time? Yeah, no commercials. Well, there's some advantage there. You know, I'm not the most polished guy. I know that. I just want to make sure the information's good, and that we go through the different, because there's different buckets. I'm calling them buckets. Arkansas's portal, Kentucky's portal, Kentucky's committed, now decommitted players, the regular transfer portal, coaching staff, and we got all kinds of stuff now. 10, 11 days since the formal announcement of the hire, we've got 2 names that are solidified. We can think we know everything and a lot of other stuff that's about to happen, but until they happen, again, where are the things, commitments, staff announcements, all those things have bulk, they have weight, they have fangs, they have hair, they're real, they become real. And that's what we're looking for. Process and results. I always talk about the difference between those. A lot of the stuff we're talking about until it happens is really, some of it I don't think is speculation, some of it's well sourced and it's good information out there, but things change. Things sometimes take longer than you think, and then you start to, your mind plays games and goes, well, we're behind now. Well, again, 5 to 6 weeks to go before players start moving on campus. This may be one of those situations where you've still got scholarships open and on move-in day. Maybe not. That's what I'm saying. Where does the momentum really start to hit? Again, a big flood of news just last night. A lot of the stuff I talked about came out yesterday. Some of my source information came out over the weekend, and I'm just now getting to it. And then you've got a visitor. You've got a 5-star visitor. Good work, Kevin. Thank you. Appreciate. Anticipation is a killer. Yes, it is. Hope y'all are well. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, guys, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I had a heavy loss last week. It's really still, I'm dealing with that. Lost my best friend in the whole wide world, Olive. My 13-year-old dog had some, the dog's age, just like all of us do. And we're moving past that now. So I've been a little bit teary-eyed and going through some stuff here. But we're moving on from that. But Olive, wherever you are, if you're able to listen and with your dog, Olive understood a lot of the things I was talking about just by her reactions. And so if she's able to hear me now, she knows she's number one in my heart. All right, guys, going to wrap it up now. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm going to thank my sponsor, Jose's Bar and Grill in Town. Doug Allen and the gang love what they do. Oh dear, Kevin. Olive is hanging with you, Kevin. Yeah, I think I keep looking around and feel it's almost like she's there. I keep thinking she's there. It's one of those things, just it's kind of natural to go through that. But I've really been locked in all the good memories and positive stuff and the reasons why she made everybody in the family just brought everybody up, no matter what the moments and real life situations were. She was always a fixer. She was a connector. I use those words in basketball. Olive was the point guard, the coach, and sold the popcorn and the tickets too sometimes. So that was great. What is the holdup? Is Cal? No, I don't. I think it's Cal said be patient. He told us to be patient. And what we were hearing in that initial press conference was 5 to 8 guys maybe out of the chutes that were ready to come on board. It's not that that's untrue. But when I hear that, I'm thinking, okay, commitments will start rolling through the weekend. Maybe that's what I'm hearing. Calipari, I should have been listening to his word. Patience. He's got a process. He does things a certain way. A lot of these guys are probably chomping at the bit. Now, the longer things go and you don't have them locked up, other folks are getting in their ears. There's always the potential for stuff like that to alter what you think might happen. But that's why Calipari's the best in the game. He doesn't win them all, but he wins. He wins more than most often. He's I think the best recruiter of all time. We'll see what results play out as a coach at Arkansas when it comes to results. But I think he's a guy that's got something to prove still at 65 years old, making this 4th stop as a college head coach. And I think better than anyone, he understands how important recruiting is. And I think his staff, he's always got a staff that can recruit the hell out of it along with him. And I think that in combination of getting that together, figuring things out with that, and players in the portal that he wants, players in the portal that he can get. And then he's got a unique position of having player retention from Kentucky, retention for him and what he does. What's in the Arkansas pot that he might be interested in? Really quiet on that so far. And then that vaunted class, man, that really, I mean, he had 3 McDonald's All-Americans and 5 of the 6 are top 50 rated guys. So a lot for him to work with. And I think, again, we start to hear more names maybe as soon as today. I officially hit Coach Callis tight lip. That's good. Good info, Slim. I don't know if that's a derogatory shot or not. All right, guys, I made it to an hour. Once again, thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I loved it. Great mood today because I think we're going to get some more info coming in, and let's hope that's true. Until next time, I'll see you then.